Hello 522 participants. Today we'll be learning about using a routines-based interview in order to help families identify their priorities and concerns for their children. The routines-based interview is a really nice format. It's a semi-structured interview that guides what feels like a conversation with a family about how their day goes, how their child participates, what they'd like to see their child do next. And by using a semi-structured interview in this way to guide a conversation with a family, we're able to really lean on the family's expertise of their child rather than on test scores in order to guide the goals that we include in our IEPs, Ifsps, ILPs. Our learning targets for today include understanding the structure of the routines-based interview. What are the types of questions that you ask? How does this flow? And then how do we use the routines-based interview to help families select meaningful priorities? How do we guide families through this process to identify those skills and behaviors that they would really like to see their children have next? Now we know that the typical way of determining outcomes that end up on IFSPs or IEPs. Now remember, IFSPs, Individualized Family Service Plans, are the plans for children birth to 3 who have developmental delays and disabilities. And IEPs are Individualized Education Programs that are for students from age 3 until 21 served through the public school system. Many private schools also include something like an IEP, even though they're not required to do so. This is true in international education as well. And so some schools will call these IEPs, others choose a different name, so not to be confused with U.S. federal requirements. Sometimes these are called ILPs, Individualized Learning Plans. Across all of these types of documents, we're determining the goals. What are our goals for this student for this year based on the priorities for this student or this child to succeed in the general education curriculum. In the past, special educators and other specialists have been guided to use instruments in order to come up with these outcomes. So we administer a traditional assessment instrument that decides what services a student qualifies for or a child qualifies for, and then those service providers, leaning on the lowest items missed, determine the outcomes for that child or for that student. We know that Bronfenbrenner, remember Bronfenbrenner, the person who guided us to think about ecological systems theory, says that traditional assessments measure the strange behavior of children in strange situations with strange adults for the briefest possible periods of time. So this is not where we want to lean to get our outcomes for children. We want to be really leaning on standards in the general curriculum, and importantly, we want to think about how this child's skills and behaviors look within the context of everyday routines and activities. This is where we can get the best information for individualizing goals so that they're optimally meaningful for the child and for the family. So this does not mean that traditional assessment instruments are not important. They are. They help us determine whether a student is in or out. Does the student qualify for services? And in the U.S., this would mean qualify according to Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requirements and state eligibility definitions. There's no dual eligibility in the U.S., and what this means is once a child qualifies for services, qualifies to be served either through early intervention or through Part B services in the school system, the student does not have to also demonstrate that they're eligible to receive individual services. So once a student is eligible, it should then be up to the team to determine what supports are needed for this child to be successful. And so the information from traditional assessments is still important, but what is important is that we take the critical skills. What are the skill areas that were highlighted from this instrument that this student is behind on or needing some additional support? From there, we need to think about how do those skills look during everyday life. So it's not enough just to know this student is one standard deviation behind in this developmental domain or with this skill. We need to think about, for that child, for that student, how does that skill look every day? And also, traditional assessments don't measure everything. There may be a particular skill or behavior. For example, students with autism frequently have difficulty transitioning between events or between settings or between people. And that may not appear on a traditional instrument. That skill, that need, it may be that student's most important need, and it may not show up on that traditional assessment. And so a routines-based interview is a way for us to get that information about how the student's skills and behaviors look during the everyday routines and activities where they're needed. So the takeaway message, your brain and your ability to have meaningful conversation with a family and other providers, other teachers, other educators, counselors, your ability to do this and select priorities with other adults is a better tool than any protocol that's given to you. So when we think about routines-based outcomes, we can talk about standards-based outcomes, and those are still important, how we select outcomes that are based on general curriculum standards. But in this module, we're going to focus on routines-based outcomes. And we do take the functional assessment information that we've gotten from any testing that's been done. But again, we need to know about how that student, that child is functioning in everyday classroom and home routines. And the question that we're trying to answer is, what is needed for this child to participate in, to learn from, and enjoy everyday routines? And this can lead us to a set of very meaningful outcomes, very relevant outcomes, outcomes that everyone is going to notice and see as a priority within everyday life. So the functioning in daily routines piece that we're trying to capture can best be ascertained through a routines-based interview. Robin McWilliam, one of my mentors, developed the routines-based interview, had it published in 1992, and has studied it through numerous research projects since that time with positive results. And I can say that I've used the routines-based interview countless times and also have had amazing results in both getting high-quality information, but also using it as a way to build a relationship with families. Some of the first conversations we have with families set the tone for our relationship with them. And when we as professionals can sit back and let families take the lead and listen to the information that they have, listen to their priorities, their concerns, their worries, their hopes, really sets the tone for a collaborative relationship where we are developing plans and implementing strategies together. Through a routines-based interview, we collect information on children's development just like we do through testing, but it's contextualized. We see exactly what the motor skills or the cognitive skills or the communications look like when they're needed during everyday routines. And through this process of building relationships with families and getting information that's contextualized, we're able to arrive at outcomes that are family-centered. Those outcomes that respond not only to what the school or childcare setting says needs to happen, but those that are situated within a family-centered context. With the a routines-based interview, we ask about each routine of the day, and routine does not mean schedule. So routine is not a synonym for schedule, and even Robin McWilliam even suggests that we don't even use the word routine during our interviews. I'm pretty sure in the one that I'm going to show you that I did, I think I used the word routine. So, but that shouldn't be the focus. It shouldn't be the focus that there is a schedule. Families still do things every day. They still wake up, they still eat, they still go do things out, they still have a way of doing things in their homes, and that's the focus of the routines-based interview, not a schedule. Within each of the routines, we want to ask about the child's engagement, independence, and social relationships. With engagement, we're wanting to find out, what does the child do? How does the child participate? How does participation look? What are the child's favorite things? And exactly how do the child's skills look in engagement within this routine? Next, we ask about independence. So how much help does the child need to participate? What do the individual skills look like relative to amount of help needed to be able to participate? What is the child able to do now by him or herself with help, and what do we want to see happen next? And finally, we want to ask about the social relationships. The interview is not only about the child, but also about what is everybody else doing, and how is everybody interacting, and how does everybody feel about it? Are we happy with this routine, and to what extent? In Chapter 2 of Robin's edited book, Working with Families of Young Children with Special Needs, he outlines the specifics of the routines-based interview, and so you'll read this chapter in order to prepare for your own routines-based interview. I would suggest, as you prepare for the routines-based interview, that you try this out on someone you know, your significant other, someone else in the course, in order to get a feel for it. Even though the routines-based interview seems simple, the questions seem simple, I'll show you an example of me doing a routines-based interview, and it seems simple. But if you're like everybody else who does it, including me, the first few times that you do it, you may forget to ask some questions, and you may find that you're finished in 20 minutes, when in fact a high-quality routines-based interview takes around an hour and a half to conduct. And so if you find you got finished in 20 minutes, then it's not that it wasn't a complex enough situation, it's that you could add to your interviewing skills and your follow-up questions perhaps. The best way to tell you how to do a routines-based interview, of course reading the book chapter will help and this lecture will help, but the best way is to really see a routines-based interview. And so next, I'd like to show you clips from a routines-based interview that I conducted with Tracy, a mom of Annalise. Annalise is a 2.5-year-old, and I'll give you more information about Annalise after you watch my doing the routines-based interview. While you're watching the video, take notes. Be thinking about what you notice that I do or don't do, or ask or don't ask. And then perhaps watch the video again and take notes about Annalise. What do you learn about Annalise during the routines-based interview?
Tracy, thanks so much for being willing to demonstrate the routines-based interview with me today. As I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about your day and how it goes, and how Annalise and Sam and Chris and you all get through your day. And by doing that, we hope to learn a little bit about what your priorities are, if you have any concerns, what you'd like to see happen next, so that we can develop a plan that will work for you and your whole family. So thanks a bunch. If you wouldn't mind giving just a little bit of background of who lives in your house and how old your children are, and who's in early intervention, so we can begin.
Okay. My husband Chris and I have an 8-year-old son, Sam, and a 2.5-year-old daughter, Annalise. And Annalise is in the early intervention program.
Great, great. Well, thanks. I guess we'll start out with waking up in the morning. We'll just go through each of your routines and talk a little bit about how they go and what everybody's doing during those routines. So at waking time, do you mind telling me just a little bit about how that goes? And I'm going to take notes the whole time, if that's okay. And how does waking up start in the morning?
Okay, well, Chris is up and out the door before the kids wake up, so he's gone by the time they wake up. I'm up already.
Okay.
And then usually Annalise will be the next to wake up when she hears noise. Usually it's the garage door opening that wakes her up, and then she sometimes comes downstairs on her own, sometimes lays in bed and calls out.
Is she in like a toddler bed now?
She is. Mm-hmm.
And does she wakes up happy?
About 50% of the time she wakes up happy.
Okay. And what does she do the other 50% of the time?
Cries and screams and starts asking for juice or daddy or Sam.
Okay. And what works to help move that along and helps to calm her down at that point?
If I just stop what I'm doing and just attend to her, cuddle,
Okay.
take her on my lap and cuddle.
So after you've had your snuggle time and Annalise has calmed down, is Sam awake at this point?
Yeah, he usually wakes up shortly after her.
And does he get ready on his own at that point? And
He kind of shuffles around. He's kind of a slow waker, but he's very easygoing, so he just kind of watches. If Annalise is doing good, he kind of takes his cues from her. And
yeah, do they play or interact
They
together? So then what's next? What happens after they're kind of up and going? And
then they have breakfast together. Annalise is still in a high chair. She does better there. So they'll eat together.
do they
and
eat the
talk.
same things or have certain preferences? Or
Usually they'll have cereal. She'll usually want what Sam's having.
she can use a spoon and feed
Yes.
herself? Are there any things that she can't have or is not supposed to have? Or
No.
Okay, great. And what about, and they both drink milk, juice, just
Juice,
the usual?
milk, both, yeah.
And is she drinking from a sippy cup or has
Sippy cups,
sippy
yes.
cup? What happens if, have you tried a regular cup or do you know what happens yet? If she has
She dumps it on her face and
Okay,
screams.
okay. Is there anything that you'd like to change about mealtime or anything you'd like to see her do next?
Yeah, I would imagine that the transition to like a booster seat is probably in order developmentally, but she does so well in the high chair. She's contained and she stays and she seems content, so we've not moved her out of the high chair.
And it sounds like you may not be interested in doing that right now.
Well, I mean, when we go out, she needs to sit, but
Yeah.
she's used to being confined in the high chair, and so that's basically we don't go out. We don't go out to eat.
Is that the main reason?
Yes.
Would you like to be going out to eat?
Yes.
Great. Is there anything else that you'd like to see her do next at mealtime? As far as you mentioned the sippy cup, that she's not using a regular cup yet, or
I'm
not
I'm
so
okay
much a
with
priority?
that, yeah.
Great. Okay. After breakfast, then what?
Then it's usually playtime, or our routine has been getting Sam to school, which, of course, with summer we won't have that, but he still has
Right.
camps and activities that I need to get him to, and that's a big challenge in our day.
In what way?
Getting Annalise into the car and into the car seat. I find myself using bribes or, I would like to just be able to say, time to get in the car, and we've got a routine. We sing a little song, Sam to school, time to, and so we get her in the car, but then getting her into the seat is usually a struggle, like folding her in half to get her into the seat and buckled.
Uh-huh.
And then
Is it always this way, or
almost always.
Almost always.
Almost always. We marvel and, applaud and make a big deal when it's not to recognize that, but it's almost always.
it sounds like you're using some great strategies there. So how does Sam deal with all of this?
At that point, he kind of just withdraws. He gets his backpack, he gets his things. He's just goes
Yeah.
about his business and gets into his...
And knows this is what happens,
yeah,
and I'm
he-
just going to get in.
I can just see he kind of shuts down at that point
Yeah,
because it's loud.
yeah. It sounds like there's some things you'd like to change about this, and we would like for her to just go when, like you said, when you say it's time to go to the car, that she goes. Okay, so is it about leaving the door? When does it start?
She's actually okay up through when we sing the Go to School song. She even cooperates. She puts her hands up because I wrap a blanket around her. She twists around in a circle, likes to be kind of wrapped in the blanket. And then when it's time to get in the seat and buckled up, that's when it starts.
Okay.
It kind of deteriorates there.
All right. So getting her dressed, when you're getting her dressed, she's not
okay.
So
She's
even
okay.
though that may signal it's time to go, not so much there. So after somewhat of a struggle, you guys are in the car and buckled and ready to go. Once she's buckled in, does it end at that point, or is she still upset?
She is usually soothed then by the music that I start in the car.
Okay.
So as soon as she figures out that, yep, this is really going to happen, she starts asking for a particular song. And until I get around to the driver's seat and get that song, she's demanding, Dinosaurs, she's just telling me she wants that song. And then she just kind of escalates until the music starts, and then she's okay.
Okay. So by the time you're out of the driveway or shortly down the street, things are calming down, and she's singing maybe?
She's not screaming anymore.
Okay. Not thrilled, but not
Right.
too unhappy. See, I usually do happy faces, brownie face. I guess I'll just do a line
Kind of a line.
there. Okay, so she's okay, and nobody's screaming anymore. How long does it take you guys to get to Sam's school?
10 minutes.
About 10 minutes. And when Sam leaves, is she unhappy, or is Sam unhappy? Anybody unhappy when
Sam is happy.
Sam's happy?
Sam is happy, and another, I guess, wave of unhappiness with Annalise because she wants to get out and go into school, because sometimes we do, or sometimes we go to the playground, but 9 times out of 10 we don't, and she's very unhappy and is almost inconsolable.
And what does she do to let you know she's unhappy?
It screams no, 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 no. Or playground, she wants to swing.
The playground at the school?
At the school.
Okay. So she's super unhappy when you don't
Very,
get out of the car.
very.
Okay. All right. On days that you get out of the car to go in with Sam or to go to the playground, how does she participate in that? What does she like to do at the playground?
Swing.
She wants to swing. Does she swing herself? Want you to push her?
She wants to be pushed.
Always, that's what she wants? And is she chattering when she's on the swing, or quiet?
Yes,
or
yes. Singing. But it's not only the playground that she wants to. She also wants to go into school and see all the kids. She enjoys the chaos of the hall, and she knows a lot of the kids, and they recognize her, and so,
Okay.
she interacts with the kids.
And how does she do that? When she goes in and sees them, what does she want to do?
She wants to hit the boys on the head.
Okay.
It's kind of a routine. Sam's friends let her hit them on their head, and they fall
So
over,
it's fun.
and it's fun.
It's fun for
Yep.
everybody. It's a game. So when you do go in, and she gets to do that, and then it's time to go.
It's bad.
Okay.
It's almost always a tantrum when we start heading towards the door. She'll put her hands on both sides she'll hold on to the threshold, and I'll have to, peel her hands off and carry her out screaming.
Okay. Is that why you don't go in?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. What would you like to have happen in the mornings when you're dropping him off? What would you like to do?
I would like to have the option of maybe going in if we have the time and letting her enjoy that interaction and having the transition to leaving be smooth. But I would also like to have the option of not going in, because the school is set up for drop-off.
Okay, so she's gotten very upset because it's time to leave. At what point does she calm down and become okay again?
She may scream and cry almost all the way home.
Okay.
until she realizes we're
That's
not
what-
going back.
Yeah. When does it change from being upset about leaving to upset about getting into the car again, or does it remain?
I'm not sure. It's a total tantrum. So I'm not even sure she's sure.
What
I mean,
is
it's hitting herself and hitting the car, kicking the seat. So
Is she saying anything?
no, she doesn't verbalize then what it is.
Saying no or
Sometimes no, mostly
mainly screaming?
Mhm.
Okay. So it sounds like just that whole routine from beginning to take Sam to get back is oftentimes very unpleasant, regardless of which option you choose. Okay. So it sounds like there are a variety of things you may do at that point. Do you mind just giving me an example of one thing that you do so I can?
We may go out and dig in the sandbox.
Okay. And what does she, is there something in particular she enjoys doing in the sandbox?
Filling buckets and
Dumping?
Yeah.
Is she talking to you or interacting with you while she's doing that?
Naming things, yeah. She's naming
Like what?
ladybugs and the toys that are in the sandbox.
Okay. So she might label the toys and ladybug, and it sounds like she may have lots of words.
Yeah, she has lots of words, lots of individual words.
Does she is she putting any of them together?
Sometimes two words together. But she uses the same phrases to mean many things.
And what is that?
She'll say, it's okay. It means I'm done, time to go. It's okay.
It's a multi-purpose
Yes.
phrase there you
Mhm.
got. Okay, so sometimes two words. Is it's okay the main two-word phrase she says, or does she put lots of two words?
Lots of two.
Okay, great. All right, so you may have gone out to swing or play in the sandbox. Are you able to kind of do things around the house during that time, or are you with her?
I can do things as long as she can see me, or I've set something up for her to do. Like she likes to smash sand piles, so if I make a bunch of piles, she'll do it. Or if I take her hands and try to show her how to make them, then she'll kind of do it for a while, but then wants me to be there again.
So if you're needing to do something in the backyard while she's there, you can kind of get her going, go do it a little.
Yes.
And are you okay with that?
Yes.
That's okay. All right. So, so if the weather's nice and you've had a little outside time, or maybe you've done something inside, well, what are some of, like, if you're inside, let's say the weather's bad, is there something in particular that she likes to choose
Paint.
inside? She likes to paint. Lots of the time?
Lots of time. Yeah, lots of time painting.
How does she like to paint? With her fingers or with
No,
brushes?
paintbrush. Yeah.
What do her pictures look like?
Blue, all blue.
Always all blue?
Always all blue.
Always all blue. We usually end up with one. It's usually several colors, and they get mixed together, and it's all whatever that color is. But
yeah. Well, that's what the paint box looks like, but the blue is always.
she chooses blue. So those are a couple great examples of your playtime in the morning. Is there anything that you'd like to change about playtime, or anything you'd like to see her do next with any of her play?
I would like to help her to focus on one activity. She kind of flits from the reason the painting works so good is because she's contained there. But say if she just has free time in the family room where her toys are, she'll flit from thing to thing to thing and really not kind of complete anything.
So you'd like to see her complete an activity or spend more time on a single activity?
Focus.
If it's something that you've set up for her, like the painting, about how long will she stay with that?
5 minutes would be top.
Okay. Or outside. Does outside play last longer?
Yes. The sandbox can last 15 minutes or so.
Okay. And then if she's got sort of free reign of, are the toys in the den, or are the toys, where does she?
Some
her
are in the
room?
den and then some are in the basement. So she
Okay.
can go back and forth to 2 areas.
So if she's got kind of free reign of that, how long would she, and you haven't set something up for her, how long would she stick with a toy? Or,
Usually, a minute.
okay. So what do you guys do next? What's after it? Do you,
We'll usually go and visit friends, or I go to a Bible study, so she's in the nursery there one morning.
you said she's in the nursery. How many children are in the nursery?
About 10.
Is it the same caregiver each time?
Yes.
And how does, first off, so if you're going on an outing, getting ready to go on the outing, how does that go? Is it similar to the morning when you're leaving and getting in the van?
No, and if I tell her about it and where we're going, and it's something that she wants to do, she'll cooperate. And we'll even go and get her clothes or get her shoes or
If it's Bible study, does she want to do that?
no.
If it's visit one of your friends?
Yes.
Or her, is
Her
it her
friends.
friends that you're visiting? She might want to do that.
Yes.
Okay, and so if you're visiting friends, happy time, Bible study, not happy time. What, is it the same as the earlier one that you described, if it's Bible study?
Pretty much. Pretty much. Although, maybe not as intense, but she doesn't want to go. But it's not as intense. The screaming doesn't last as long.
Have you noticed, or do they mention anything in particular that happens right before there's this breakdown? Or not one particular event, or?
I can't really identify because it's not like a child taking a toy from her. In fact, she would probably be the one deciding she wanted a toy. So there's really
Okay. Okay, so you're in Bible study, and I imagine that's probably an enjoyable
Yes.
time for you to be in Bible study. Do they come get you if things break down?
sometimes, yes.
How often do you think that happens?
Like maybe every 5th or 6th time. And it depends. I mean, there are the same workers in there, but then moms also rotate through. So it depends on the
Okay.
mom that's in there.
Okay.
Usually watch a video after lunch.
Okay.
It's her wind down.
For nap, so she takes her nap there. Is that in the den, or?
She falls asleep and I usually move her upstairs so I can.
And how long will
Keep
she
working.
usually nap?
About an hour and a half.
Is that your time?
Yes.
You like that time?
I have to be honest, yes.
I hear you.
Sam comes off the bus at about 3:30, or I guess we would go and get him now, and they kind of play for a while. They'll play together. They'll play together, and then she kind of starts to bug him. He just wants to build, and she just wants to destroy, and
Yeah.
I guess that's one thing we would like to work on is, no means no. Sam is done.
Okay. So is Annalise happy to see Sam?
Oh, yes. That's
Really
a
happy.
great time, yeah.
And then she's wanting to be right there with him until he's had enough.
Right. And then, and then sometimes he goes down to the basement and I have to keep her upstairs because he really just needs to wind down after school. That's kind of a conflict because she really, really wants to be right by him.
And he's been with kids all
Yeah,
day.
he just
may need
wants-
some alone time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sam would like that routine change.
You would like that.
He'd like some alone time for Sam. Okay. So it sounds like you would like for Annalise, if Sam's needing some alone time, to kind of give him some space and be okay with that for a few minutes. How much alone time does he need?
It's a half an hour. He just needs just a little bit to unwind.
Yeah. All right, so now we're at about 4 o'clock or so. What happens? Do they then engage back in play for a while?
They do. And if if he hasn't come home or if he's at a friend's or he has some after-school activities, then she's right there by me. And that's kind of a struggle preparing dinner. She's not willing to just even engage in an activity that I've arranged for her at that point. It's almost like she changes the senses a change in rhythm, and she just kind of wants to be right by me. She knows something's happening.
And so that interferes with your preparing dinner because is she wanting to be held? Is
Yes.
she's wanting you not to engage with
Right.
the dinner preparation?
She'll literally like take my face and, mommy.
Okay, if Sam is there, is this an issue?
Yeah.
It's
It
just
is.
at dinner time.
It's when I start moving around, move away from her and go into the kitchen. Even if I
Okay.
set her up with painting, then nothing. She wants me to paint with her. There's really nothing she wants to engage in herself.
Is that pretty much, other than the nap time and video time right before nap, is she needing you to be engaged with her, or is it really different? Is this different at dinner time?
This is different. This is
It sounds like before she kind of lets you wander in
right.
and out.
This is like glomming onto my leg and, would like me
I
not
need
to take
all
a step.
of your attention.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you typically do when this starts happening? Just keep.
It just depends on my energy level.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just sit there with her and, color or paint, or sometimes I hold her and try to do as much as I can and hope we have dinner before 8 o'clock that night.
Yeah.
I would like, though, to be able to have her engage in something, even if it's at the kitchen table.
And then when Chris gets home, is she?
Oh, then it's all about Daddy.
Then it's all about
Yeah.
Daddy. Yeah. And Sam?
All about Daddy.
Sure. So what do they do when he walks in the door?
Just run. They hear the garage door opener and they run and
Daddy's home. Yeah. And so he's excited to see them,
Yes.
of course. And so are you kind of finishing up getting ready for dinner, or is it ready at that point?
we usually eat around 6:30, so somewhere in there.
Yeah. You're kind of finishing up while the energy is kind of diverted to
Right.
Dad. Yeah. So that's a good time,
That's
it sounds
a good
like.
time, yeah.
You're smiling really big, so it sounds like that's a
It's a good
great time
time.
of your day. Okay. And so what might Chris and Sam and Annalise do right when he gets home?
They may all go outside and play in the sand.
And does that go well?
Oh, yeah.
That's all of this is
It
a
all
happy
goes
time.
well, and he'll whirl around on the floor and do tricks, and
Yeah.
they all climb on him and swings. Annalise, and she would do that for really
Yeah.
a half an hour, just let him
So
swing.
they're
her.
just all right there together.
yeah.
Okay, great. And are you out there with them, or are you?
No,
No. Yeah. I hear you.
I'm stepping back.
I hear you. Okay. So after a little while, it sounds like 30 minutes, an hour or so, then you guys transition to mealtime. Does this mealtime go well?
Very well.
As well?
Everybody has a job. Annalise
Oh, yeah?
pulls her high chair over. Sam gets the milk, and they have their routine.
And then when dinner is over,
Immediately more playtime.
more of the playtime. Same as before?
Mhm.
And then do you guys transition to bath time?
Yes.
Or
Sam takes care of himself. He'll take his
Sam.
shower.
okay, independent little guy.
Yeah. Oh, yes, quite.
Okay, and so then you guys help Annalise. Do one of you help? Does
I
one of you
usually
help?
do her bath.
And is she okay with getting in the bath?
Really, comparatively, she is. But it's usually she doesn't want to get in, and then she doesn't want to
Doesn't
get out.
wanna get out,
and then
yeah.
she's- But it's pretty much fun. She enjoys the toys, and she really has fun in the water.
Is there anything you would change about it?
Not really, no.
Okay. Anything you'd like to see her do next?
No, she's
Okay.
she's fine.
When it's time to go to bed, is she willing to go to bed?
No.
Not willing to go to bed? How does she let you know she's not willing?
Well, we sing a bedtime song, and we start walking up the stairs, and I say, it's time for bed, time for bed. No sleep. And so I take her hand, and then she'll walk up the stairs and kind of sometimes be sobbing and boo-boo lip and get into bed,
Yeah.
and then doesn't want to stay in bed alone. So I have to lay down by her and rub her back.
Until she falls asleep? Is that, would you like to change that? Or
Yeah, I
are
would
you okay
like
with
to
that?
be able to have her hop in bed and say goodnight.
Okay.
In my dreams. Well, at least I would love to be able to read to her and, have her get drowsy and go to sleep
And
on
say
her own.
goodnight. Yeah. Okay. Great. Are there, we've talked a lot about your routines, and we've talked about a lot of things that you'd like to see change or things that you'd like to see happen next. Are there any concerns or priorities that you have in general that we haven't brought up yet? I'll go back through these in a minute, but is there anything in general about Annalise's development or about just family things that you'd like to see different or?
Well, her significant speech delay, I know contributes, and we've always kind of struggled with that. How much of it is she really understanding and able to express, or is this a behavioral thing? How much of it is, what's the cause and effect, or is there one? And then, so that's kind of pervasive. And then help dealing with, when the answer is no, it shouldn't always be deteriorating into a tantrum. And sometimes it's no, and sometimes it's this instead, but it's kind of like we walk on eggshells around that issue. Like, oh,
Sure.
She's saying she wants pizza and there's no pizza in the house. It's like, oh,
This could go bad.
this could, right. And you just kind of hold your breath, or, no, you can't have another cookie. Ooh, and hold to what you've said, but
Right.
not have it deteriorate.
So it sounds like, I'm going to kind of go back through here and see the things that you've brought up. That morning routine of getting Sam out the door, either to a camp or to school, getting into the car, as well as choosing to either go inside or not, that both of those routines seem not fun. And you said that you'd like for her to be able to go with the flow a little bit there, and if it's time to get in, go, and if we get to go in, great, and if we have to leave, that you'd like for her to be okay with that as well. It sounds like it's why you don't go on a lot of outings, and you don't, because this getting in the car and going is not, doesn't always go well. And back to this priority that you mentioned, just dealing with no, like if there's a choice, it sounds like you want to be able to give the choices and it to be okay. You mentioned you didn't bring it back up as a major priority there at the end, but that the reason you're not going out to restaurants is because the high chair works so well. Her high chair works so well, and so you brought that up. You mentioned that she says it's okay to mean a lot of different things. I don't know if that's something that you'd like changed, or you'd like for her next to start using phrases that are different, meaning depending on what she wants to do or not. But you brought that up. You brought up that you'd like for her to spend more time in an activity, to focus on one activity and do it longer, and focus on that and be engaged in an activity longer. Mealtime was great. Nap time seemed great. And then some of the same sort of related things in the afternoon that are not going well, that, if the choice is to stay upstairs and give Sam some alone time, you'd like for her to do that without getting upset. And then in the evening, you brought up the preparing dinner time, that's not really very fun, because she's needing so much of your attention and you're needing to get something done. And I think in general, and then bedtime, that you would like for her to get in bed and be able to kind of go to sleep. Of those, do you have a couple that are the most important to you?
The dealing with direction, no meaning no, and just the kind of like uncertainty, and again the walking on eggshells. I would need some suggestions there. I mean, we've got the whole spectrum, from people saying pick your battles to, you've got to set the bar high, and then, there's got to be somewhere in the middle, but what we're doing now it's not effective.
Sure. Okay. Anything, you mentioned that she does have a speech delay, and you're interested in understanding kind of the role of her communication in some of the behavioral, in some of
Exactly.
her behavior, and maybe strategies. You're interested, it sounds like, in strategies to help with speech, but to also how does that work with the behavior?
Right.
Okay. So would you say that is your next priority?
Yes.
Of those others, is there a particular order, the focusing on a particular?
The focusing
Okay.
on an activity.
Okay. The high chair, is that one farther down on the list
Yeah.
somewhere?
Not
Something you're so much interested in working on right now. Are those your three main
They are.
priorities there? Okay. What we would do is, there we go. What we would do now is we would continue conversations with this about all of this, obviously, and if we were sitting right next to each other, we would have a list probably a little better than this chicken scratch that we could really go through and think about a lot more. But I think that gives you a good idea. Tracy was so super to give us a lot of detail on those routines.
Thank you
Thanks
for
a
having
bunch.
me.
Now that you've seen a routines-based interview, I'd like for you to think about what did you notice about the interview? What kinds of questions did I ask? What kinds of things did I not ask? Perhaps what could I do to improve the messages that I sent to families? I look forward to seeing your discussions about what you noticed about the routines-based interview and how I conducted it. That are the ways that are in line with what we know about family-centered practices and this idea of building a relationship with families. I hope you also see that we were able to get a lot of great information about Annalise, and the kinds of information we have at Annalise are different than if we had just conducted a traditional assessment and had a protocol outlining her skills. Hopefully, you've got sort of a mental picture of Annalise. You've got an idea of how things look for Annalise and how her skills and behaviors look during everyday contexts, and can see that we can easily build a plan for Annalise and her family based on the information that we got from the routines-based interview. As you think about what you noticed about Annalise, although I intentionally did not ask any questions about a diagnosis, why she qualified for services, because I wanted you to see what all we could get from a routines-based interview without knowing anything. Now, normally when you conduct a routines-based interview, you'll have some information about a child, about a student. You'll have perhaps testing results, unless it's your very first contact with the family, and in which case you might use a routines-based interview to design your assessment, your formal assessment process with the student. But what are the kinds of things that you noticed about Annalise? From this, would you venture a guess of what her diagnosis might be based on the profile of skills and behaviors? I'm not going to give you the answer to that question here. I'd like to give you the answer to that question after you have a chance to discuss it as a large group. But I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what you noticed about her skills and behaviors, and perhaps what type of diagnosis or profile that you might want to explore more as you think about Annalise. There were certain patterns of skills, patterns of behaviors, patterns of preferences that might lead me to ask further questions and might lead me to want to involve other people from other disciplines, for example. We heard that Annalise had sensitivity to certain textures. I don't know if you noticed, but when I asked Tracy about finger painting or painting, I said, does she use her fingers? And Tracy said no. And I didn't follow that up. I could have, but I got the sense from the way that Tracy answered that question that no, she would never touch the paint. So I'd like for you to explore sort of these patterns of skills and behaviors that you noticed. Hopefully you see that the routines-based interview gives us a rich profile of information about how a child's skills look, but in a meaningful context, how they look during everyday routines and activities, which leads us to build the goals, outcomes with families that are truly meaningful to that child and family. You might have noticed some of these types of questions that I asked. Instead of saying, what time does something happen, times did come up because Tracy did seem to have more of a schedule, but not all families will. And so you can ask questions like, well, what happens next? After you're awake, what happens next? Because times may vary. That varies by culture, it varies by microculture. So individual families have different ways of operating. And so asking what happens next. If a family says, oh, it varies from day to day, you can say, well, what usually happens? And if a family says, well, there's not one usual way, then you can narrow it down even more and say, well, let's think about yesterday. Let's think about how yesterday looked. You want to start broad, but if we are having difficulty with coming up with the routines, you can narrow it more. We ask about what everybody else is doing so we get a sense of social relationships. We ask about if it's enjoyable for everyone to get an understanding of the family's satisfaction with daily routines. Since the time of this interview that I conducted, Robin has developed a protocol that you can find in the chapter in his book. And we're asked to prompt families, to rate their satisfaction with individual routines. And so that can be one way for us to get a clearer understanding of how satisfied families are with the routine. If a family is saying this is a stressful time, we can ask what exactly makes this stressful. And sometimes it may feel like we're asking obvious questions, but we need to make sure we fully understand how the family feels. So during the interview, Tracy said she and her family do not go out to eat, and Annalise is having difficulty unless she's in her high chair. And I asked, is this why you don't go out? And that seems like an obvious question, and she answered, yes, of course that's why they're not going out. But that did ensure that I'm not misinterpreting anything. We want to be very, very clear about understanding a family's perspectives, because sometimes something may sound really stressful to me, but the family is fine with it. And other times something may sound like it's not too bad, but a family may find that to be very stressful. And it's the family's perspective of their satisfaction with this that really matters. We can also get an understanding of whether there are patterns of behaviors or skills. So if we're hearing a family really describe the way a child does something, we can say, does this happen at other times? Or is it specific to this routine, to give us an understanding if this is something that reaches across times of day, across routines, across subject areas, for example, across different home routines, depending on who we're interviewing. I am demonstrating this with a family member, and as a part of this class, you'll be practicing this with a family member. But we can also conduct routines-based interviews with teachers, with child care providers, with any adult who is spending significant amounts of time with a child. We can ask families to interpret their children's cues and behaviors. What does it mean when she does this? And then it can be sometimes tempting to say, have you tried? Have you tried this? Because oftentimes those of us who are interviewing are anxious to solve problems. We've got our wheels turning. So you may have noticed that during the interview, Tracy was talking about getting Annalise into the car, and that as soon as she hears the music, she stops screaming. And you probably heard that I had an idea. I kept it to myself, but I said, okay. And I had to rein my idea back in and not share what I was thinking, and not go down the path of, have you tried this? Have you tried playing music before you get out the door? Some of the ideas that probably occurred to you as well. Because the routines-based interview is a time to listen to a family. It's not a time to interject our ideas. So we can kind of keep those in the back of our minds and explore those after the routines-based interview. But it is okay to ask a family, what do you do? So when Annalise is screaming, what do you do? And being very careful not to make any kinds of judgment. Sometimes when we say, well, have you tried this? A family might interpret that to mean I should have tried something else. I should have tried playing the music before we left the house. And that's not at all the message that we want to send. Sometimes families, sometimes the wording that we use, families are expressing concerns, but the word concern may not accurately reflect how a family feels. So there have been times when I've been conducting a routines-based interview and I was using the word concern, and I realized that was not a positive word to use, and it didn't accurately reflect how the family felt. They weren't concerned. The family members were not concerned. There were just things they would like to see their child do next. And so I recognized that using the word concern was more of a deficit approach and not the approach that we needed to be taking with a routines-based interview. And so we can say, is there something you'd like to see her do next? Is there something you'd like to change about this routine? And there were times during the interview that Tracy might have said, yes, I'd like for her to do this next, but instead said, you know what, I'm okay with that. And we can see after getting the landscape of the whole interview that there were things that were more important to Tracy. It's not that she didn't want Annalise to drink out of an open cup, but there were things that were really weighing heavy on her, and we could see this by her facial expressions, by her affect. That there were some times that were very stressful to her day, and were really taking precedence as they should have. So when all of the routines are perfect, this doesn't happen too often, but sometimes it can be the language we're using. Like when I was using the word concern, it just wasn't the right word that reflected how that family felt. But we can have families project, in the future. Is there something you'd like to be doing that you're not doing? Is there something that you used to do that you can't do now that you'd like to? Let's project 6 months down the road. How would you like for this to look then? How would you like for meal times to look, or going out to look 6 months down the road? We can also ask families to think about weekends, holidays, other special events, perhaps visiting with family members, extended family, for example. So I've certainly had families who wanted to really talk about visits with extended families, sometimes for families who have children with multiple severe disabilities or diagnoses that result in very different development, trajectory of development. This sometimes interacts with the dynamics of their families and friends. Sometimes people who have children with disabilities lose friends or lose connections with their family members. And so those special events or times when they do or used to get together with extended family or friends can be a nice part of this conversation to fully understand the family's thoughts and feelings on this. Sometimes interviewees can be very quiet, and this may be that this particular person is not used to opening up to someone who's new to their family, and we can spend some time. We certainly want to be sensitive to that and notice that, and we can certainly spend time ahead of the routines-based interview just having small talk and just having normal conversation to begin to build a relationship and begin to build the ability to have open conversation. I've always enjoyed doing the routines-based interview as part of my initial contact with families. I feel it builds a great relationship with families, builds a foundation of a great relationship. But occasionally, you may get the sense that the family's not open to it. And so it is possible that sometimes it may be easier to have a routines-based interview after a couple of contacts that don't include it. Another strategy that's worked for me is to sort of normalize the interview, so to sort of interject phrases that show the family that I do this all the time. I talk with families about their daily routines, remind the family of the purpose of the interview, and interject a little bit of information. Again, it might be helpful to share a little bit of information with the family. Not too much, not enough to derail the interview, but again, just to show that you're willing to share information. Nobody has all perfect routines. Everybody has things about their daily routines that we would like to change. And so offering some of that information and a bit of your humanity can be helpful to ease families' minds and participate in the routines-based interview. The other question that people frequently ask is sometimes there are distractions, especially for those of you working with younger children and on home visits. You may be asking, well, what do I do if there are 4 pets and 3 siblings and there's a lot of chaos at the house? How do I conduct this routines-based interview? Leanne, you were in a studio. You were in a TV studio. Of course this was easy for you. Well, not exactly. I mean, I think Tracy and I would both tell you that we were pretty nervous because we were in a TV studio and it was being pumped live feed into a large auditorium of people watching us. So I don't know that that was a really easy situation. And in fact, you probably picked up that we were a little stiffer in the beginning, and then as the conversation got going, it became easier. But mostly, we want to schedule this at a time that makes sense. We want families to understand we're not there to conduct any type of intervention visit. We're not there to really work with the child or with the student. We're there for a conversation. And so if we prepare families ahead of time for what to expect, what kinds of questions we're going to ask, that can be very helpful. And let them know that you're wanting to schedule at the quietest time, the least chaotic time. And if you're working with young children and you're anticipating difficulty, then you might take another adult to keep the children occupied so that you can have the interview time. You might also give the family something ahead of time. Not all families would want to see a list of questions or possible questions, but you could give them something ahead of time so that they're less nervous about the kinds of questions that you'll ask, and so they can be thinking about their daily routines. And regardless, you sometimes are caught off guard. So sometimes you may show up and things are much more chaotic than you expected. And it's important that we just remain calm and not send messages that this is in any way a problem. Things happen. Craziness happens in life. Chaos happens. And sometimes we just have to reschedule or finish part of the interview and come back. And that's okay. That's part of a family's daily routines, right? I really look forward to hearing how your routines-based interviews go and looking to your conversations online about what you noticed about the routines-based interview.